Florida is a region all its own, featuring many historically rich places with their own story to tell. On the corner of US 1 and Grand Avenue, and just east of Lejeune Road in Coral Gables, lies a little-known secret in the rich history of the City Beautiful. Among the palm trees and small villas is a testament to the men and women who built this city, brick by brick and stone by stone. The MacFarlane Historic Neighborhood. This is a story of their lives and of the neighborhood where they lived. Coral Gables Television presents Visions from the Past, preserving the heritage of the MacFarlane Historic District. Late 19th century America was a country on the move. Through the Homestead Act of 1862, just about any American who wanted land could get their own 160-acre homestead anywhere in the country, including Florida. By 1890, settlers had claimed over 375,000 homesteads. One of those settlers was Flora MacFarlane, who claimed her 160-acre homestead in 1892 in what is today the city of Coral Gables. Another was George Merrick, who arrived in 1899 and worked on his father's plantation until age 21. Working in the fields side by side with Bahamian workers afforded Merrick the chance to form lifelong friendships with them. It is this diverse cultural outlook that connects Flora MacFarlane to George Merrick's dream of building a Mediterranean paradise in the heart of the South Florida jungle. South Florida historian Arva Moore Park says that as one of South Florida's first school teachers, Flora MacFarlane taught white and black students with equal respect. Merrick was very close to MacFarlane for that reason. Upon her death in the early 1920s, he acquired her homestead as part of his plan for Coral Gables. Though South Florida was strictly segregated, Merrick included two areas for black housing, one of which would become the MacFarlane District. Parks believes it is important to remember MacFarlane's name because of all the things she did for South Florida.
For being the first woman homesteader, for reaching out to black and white children, to being one of the first school teachers, to starting the Housekeepers Club. She was an extremely important pioneer woman in South Florida.
30 years later, Merrick's dream had been realized in the form of a new community called Coral Gables. Now, in the middle of this community was the MacFarlane homestead. The 1920s not only brought great prosperity to South Florida, but also thousands of Americans looking for a new way of life. Moving to a new town, let alone a new country, would be difficult on anyone. This point was especially true for the Bahamian workers, who were forced to live under the oppressive policies of segregation. One of the few places these workers could turn to for help was the church.
St. Mary, as well as the black church, is the sun and the center of what's happening in black culture, and especially in the MacFarlane District.
The black church, then as now, serves as the social hub of the community. Many St. Mary's worshippers can trace their family roots back to the genesis of the district.
They called it Golden Gates during that time.
Golden Gates.
My father bought 3 lots in there.
Okay.
And we, being young, we didn't want to live here because it was only about 3 houses.
Current Coral Gables residents who witnessed the beginnings of the City Beautiful remember their families working hard for the opportunities they got. They also remember the mid-1920s for something that is all too common in South Florida, a major storm. The Great Miami Hurricane of 1926, or the Big Blow as locals called it, was one of the worst hurricanes ever to hit South Florida.
I'll tell you, my father was in the room and the wind went to blowing. He said, "Come out of the room." I couldn't get out of the room. He said, "Come out, it's storming out there."
With winds in excess of 125 miles per hour, over 13,000 houses were completely destroyed. Headlines of a tidal wave drowning 300 people as far as 30 miles from the Atlantic Ocean quickly doused any ideas the residents had that their new life would be an easy one.
Looked like a ghost town, you know, everything was just blowing apart, you know, just the trees all blowing, the car boxes off the railroad and all, this thing just blowing everything. It just looked like it was lost.
South Florida agriculture took a big hit during the storm. Any workers that were not used for construction were welcomed into the orchards and fields. Due to the damage from the hurricane, not to mention the many building projects underway in Coral Gables, there was a desperate need for laborers. Working men and women poured in from the northern United States to fill some of the building needs, but the Bahamas also brought a huge influx of immigrants to our city. Many of those immigrants settled in what is today called the MacFarlane Homestead Subdivision.
Whether they were from the Bahamas or southeastern regions, I could just call a lot of names of families who you just enjoyed going by to see the beautiful bougainvilleas, the coconut trees, soursop, sugar apple. Oh, it brings back memories.
Those memories can be triggered by more than just the architecture. Modern-day parks that dot the South Florida landscape also conjure up images of days gone by. Baker and other residents of MacFarlane remember the neighborhood as a wonderful place for families. Children could usually find places to play, and their parents would always be nearby. Having work, home, and school so close together was a big attraction to living in the MacFarlane neighborhood.
The neighborhood was a very quiet one. The kids could play in the street. I don't know, I guess maybe people didn't have cars like they have now, because I look on my corner and they take their life in their hand to be standing on that corner. We had to respect the older people. We had to do that. That was mandatory. If you didn't, you got a whipping.
As construction continued, life was not easy for immigrants or their children in many ways. A lot was expected from anyone working in the South Florida swamps. While the adults were helping build a community, their kids were expected to apply themselves at the George Washington Carver High School. Though some of the original structure remains, today's Carver is only an elementary school. According to Connie Kaysen, teachers back then were always tough on the kids, especially a typing teacher by the name of Thomas Sands.
If he taught you something, you must learn it. And if you pass what you know and try to help somebody else, he will take your grade from me. He will take an A from me and give it to the person I'm helping and give me the F.
No one knows how strict Sands could be better than his son, Thomas Sands II. The younger Sands also teaches at the Carver School and tries to have the same positive impact on the students that his dad did. He says his father was tough on the kids because he knew they would be better equipped to survive desegregation of the 1950s and 60s. Sands says it is important to honor all residents and teachers in the MacFarlane district as the renovation project continues.
There's a history here that's second to none. And if our kids lose that, if you lose your history, then what else do you have? You need something to fall back on. You need to know where you came from to know where you're going.
With the completion of Henry Flagler's Railroad, George Merrick's dream was rapidly coming to fruition. Properties and land parcels were sold overnight as new money came pouring in each day. The new Biltmore Hotel was one of the popular places to be as it attracted visitors from across the country. With such rapid development and growth, these first families of migrant labor became the first generation and an important part of a bustling city in the midst of Florida swampland. Understanding the past is only part of what makes the MacFarlane district a centerpiece of Coral Gables history. When our story continues, we will see how current City Beautiful residents are trying to hold on to their past by making housing restoration one of their top priorities. Tracking trouble on the radar? This hurricane season may be a very busy one. This week on Coral Gables Television, why the city of Coral Gables wants you to plan on surviving the first 3 days after a hurricane on your own. Host Leanne Morejón explains what the city will be doing during that time in her special report, Weathering the Storm. All of us remember our first home, and for better or worse, our memories of that home are a part of who we are as people. As years went by and many of the original MacFarlane families left, those who stayed found it difficult to educate new residents about their cherished home memories.
I feel that the neighborhood needs to probably work on educating the newcomers who move in to the way things used to be, and that's just a dream. I doubt it's going to ever happen anymore, but it's just a dream that I have.
What really frightened these residents was the possibility that all of their memories of how MacFarlane used to be were going to just fade away. Baker knows it wasn't because people didn't care, but rather that life was changing so rapidly in America, so fast, that we sometimes forget our own past.
The other thing that's happening all over in communities, a lot of people are selling out and dying out, and like Antoinette said, the children and the grandchildren don't take the same interest.
Without the tireless efforts of those old enough to remember the past, a house, a family, or an entire neighborhood can simply become old and forgotten. There is always a need for old faces and new ideas. Enter architect Mike Steffens. With over 40 projects in historic restoration, Mike Steffens has been preserving historic buildings for over 18 years. The MacFarlane project drew his interest for more than just architectural reasons, as Steffens believes in the importance of preserving our community's past.
The most typical story is that these houses, the original 24-foot by 24-foot boxes, were built as housing for the railroad workers. And then after the construction of the railroad, they didn't need the houses anymore, so people bought them and they moved them here.
In moving the houses, the once sturdy structures became incredibly unstable, so much that so many of the buildings had unsafe living conditions. Finding the time and money to restore MacFarlane's architectural history proved difficult. Years of inattention to the homes led many people to believe that they could not be saved. Steffens, however, felt differently.
Although they're built structurally 10 times better than they were, and they existed and lasted here through every hurricane since 1920, so, I mean, the houses were fine before, and now they're going to be even better.
The Lola B. Walker Homeowners Association agreed and hired Steffens to oversee and design the restoration project. The MacFarlane Homestead was named a historic neighborhood in 1994 and is listed on the National Registry of Historic Sites. Having such a designation means Steffens has to take special care in the methods he chooses to use in the project.
What's most important in the process? I mean,
to support the house so it doesn't fall down?
The house hasn't changed, well, deterioration, but it's still standing.
So the historical house starts where you can see the siding ending, and it moves over this way. So the centerpiece is really the historical fabric of the house.
The style of the MacFarlane subdivision is unlike any other commonly seen in Coral Gables, especially in the mix of building styles used. Connie Kayson's family was from Georgia, but Leona Baker's family was Bahamian. The shotgun houses and bogan villas seen in the neighborhood therefore represent a mix of Caribbean architecture and the unmistakable style of the American South. Carpenters from both regions learned to appreciate and work with each other.
As far as the changes, well, my father built the house.
Your father built the house?
Yes, he built the house.
What's your father's name?
Chandler. And a lot of people used to call him Mr. Channel. You know, he was the man around here that used to like to do. He was a carpenter.
Okay.
Yes, he built the house that we're in, that I'm in now.
My grandfather was one of the carpenters along with the other Bahamian men that worked in Coral Gables with Mr. Merrick, building the walls, all the rock, where you see the coral rock, the coral houses.
Trying to understand why many of the decisions were made in the process of constructing the homes is a key to their reconstruction. For example, Stephan says the wall studs, or the vertical wooden beams that support the walls, do not have the same spacing from house to house.
This house had the wall joists that were almost 12 inches on center, which is very strange because they're usually 16 or 18 or 24. And the house across the street had wall studs that were 36 inches on center.
Having wall studs closer together would make a sturdier wall, but it would also be more expensive, which means wall spacing changed according to how much money was available at the time the house was built. Building styles were not always about money, however. Stephan says wiring a home for electricity was new to all builders back then, including the Bahamians. Wiring used in MacFarlane homes during the 1920s consisted of two bare wires wrapped in cloth running through the ceiling of the house to various porcelain knobs.
Yeah, they're porcelain knobs with a nail that goes through it, and they put the wire through it and nail it in to hold it in place.
The nail would be what was carrying the electric current, which meant that the cloth covering would sometimes start fires. Obviously, architects and carpenters have learned a few new tricks since then. Stephan says the passing of time does not mean that the work of immigrant carpenters should be seen as any less important or less skilled. Though they had to make building choices based on economics rather than style, Stephan says the MacFarlane carpenters took some care in building their very well put together houses.
I would say they were probably built by pretty decent carpenters at the time. They used wood that was generally good wood. The older wood was a better wood. It wasn't fast growth wood.
All that rock wall you see come off South Miami Avenue, down into Coconut Grove, all over in Cable,
right there by Mercy
all by Mercy Hospital. The Bahamian men did that work.
Really?
That was their marksmanship.
In addition to bringing their building styles, Antoinette Price says the men also brought their favorite material with them, coral rock.
It was a lot of coral rock from the Bahamas. You know, they're surrounded by water, so you get the coral rock out of the water.
Mike Stephan's job is to breathe life into these 80-year-old houses and bring them back to their pristine 1920s condition. When our story concludes, we'll show you how this wide range of cultural traditions is important to securing the MacFarlane District's legacy. For the latest information on what's happening in the City Beautiful, tune in to Coral Gables Now. And for an inside look on the elegant lifestyle of Coral Gables, join Robin on the scene. Watch this and much more every week on Coral Gables Television. Reconstructing anyone's past, however recent, is a very delicate undertaking. The process itself can be a chore in the MacFarlane district, because as we mentioned, the carpenters did not use one set style between them. One house builder may have had more money, while another may have had better materials, and yet another may have just chosen to use a different style.
I don't know what the situation was, but it wasn't like they were following any kind of logical building regimen.
They were just being practical.
They were using what they had.
And if they had the foundation of it, they dug out pits with a pick and laid the foundation for the house, and they poured this mortar in, and they mixed this mortar in a wheelbarrow. You know, a little wheelbarrow, and they mixed it with a whole, and then poured it in, and then set the blocks in, and bind it off with little threads, you know, with the foundation so it's still well.
And it's still standing.
It's still there.
Resident Connie Kaysen says she was always amazed at the things her father could do with building materials. One time, she remembers her father bringing home pieces of colorful tile that someone else was going to throw away. Kaysen says she and her mother thought the pieces were just junk, but when her father got done with them, their family had a beautiful new walkway. She smiles when remembering how much pride he took in his work.
It was amazing what he did with his hands, and I see it now that I'm living there. I appreciate it. I see every little nail, every little stitch that he did in that house.
It is Stefan's job to appreciate the work of all these people, including Kaysen's father. But in order to save some of those memories, some of that precious old building material will have to be thrown away. Much of the wood boards on the outside of the building, or the sheathing, had rotted away. Stefan says they had to go in and support the roof and then remove everything underneath it. The end result is that the house will have a much stronger support structure.
Well, we were rebuilding them the same way they were originally built, the same form, basically the same footprint, the same roof shape. We're not changing the appearance of them, we're just building them new.
Using special architectural techniques so as not to disturb their delicate condition, Mike Steffens is making progress in restoring the houses. The reinforced structures of some of the houses are now strong enough that they are ready to have new sheathing installed. The idea is to replicate as much of the original structure as they can.
Their porch had been enclosed, and they chose to keep it enclosed. So we're installing windows into the former porch area in a pattern that would sort of replicate a porch, a screened-in porch.
As important as it is to take care in restoring the houses, Arva Moore Park says it is equally important to remember the connection those houses have to the people who lived in them. Parks is worried the MacFarlane neighborhood may be gentrified, meaning rising property values would force the current residents out. She says that possibility makes it even more important that the MacFarlane district remain protected in the National Registry.
And there may come the time where all the rest of Black Grove, West Grove may be gentrified, which is a horror to me. And that little piece of the Flora MacFarlane homestead is going to be there to tell the story.
He's a wonder.
Through the combined efforts of the families fighting to preserve their heritage and the city and county officials trying to keep a part of history alive, the MacFarlane subdivision is today known as the MacFarlane Historic District. The project is nowhere close to completion, but Steffens likes the direction it's going. For the residents yearning to hold on to memories of years gone by, they love seeing their old neighborhood come back together.
I tell you, I would like to see it just come together. I don't care who lives in it, where you're from, just everybody get together like before.
Reverend Royal and other members of St. Mary's believe the church can help the neighborhood revival by providing a link between the past and the future. As Coral Gables tries to rebuild its past, it is important to allow the present to harmoniously blend with the memories of those who once lived here. Statues of George Merrick should exist side by side with projects dedicated to the Bahamian workers, just as Merrick himself once worked in grapefruit fields with them. By blending the classical with the contemporary, today's MacFarlane residents can keep tomorrow's young adults connected with the Bahamian workers of the past.
We have a history, and that history is alive and well. It's a history that involves both Bahamians and persons of color, African Americans as well as persons from the Caribbean.
The residents know that there will be many things from their past that they will not be able to reclaim. As nice as it would be to see all original resident names on a MacFarlane house deed, that may be too much to hope for. The world has changed, and the people have changed along with it. The feeling of knowing that your neighbors would never let you go without something you needed, that is a feeling that they would like to feel again. Maybe, just maybe, seeing their old MacFarlane homes rebuilt as new can bring some of those feelings back. For Coral Gables Television, I'm Santiago Sierra.
He's a wonder.